It was buried under 12 meters of rock and dust, hidden behind a locked blast door in a decommissioned Cold War bunker outside Novosibirsk. The team that found it wasn't looking for it. They were surveying radiation decay in sealed environments, until a Geiger counter began pulsing, not with radiation, but a rhythmic electromagnetic spike, exactly every 33 seconds. When they followed it, they uncovered a room, intact, untouched by time. At its center, a machine bolted to the floor, humming softly. It had no screen, no keyboard, only a single slot labeled Receive. The device was coated in dust, yet its internal fans were spinning. Cables led nowhere, wasn't connected to a grid. And yet, when they powered their lights, the machine woke up. A panel slid open and ejected a tape labeled with no date, no sender, just a string of repeating numbers. -12, 33 to 13 hours, 13 minutes, and 13 seconds. It was a digital format that no one could read. But when passed through a waveform decoder, it began to output something familiar. Video. And at the start of that video, a sound played. Not loud, not threatening, just familiar, like something you were sure you'd already heard. The video was short, exactly 33 seconds. It showed a hallway filled with old monitors, each screen blinking a static spiral. But what made it impossible was this. One of the monitors showed footage of the team themselves, standing in the room they hadn't entered yet. The timestamp was 3:17 a.m., 15 minutes into the future. When they checked the time, they realized something worse. Their watches were already counting backwards from that moment. The machine had recorded a memory that hadn't happened yet. They assumed it was a glitch, a staged prank. But when the hallway appeared again, exactly as shown, when the light in the corner failed the same way, when one of the team members spoke the exact words from the recording without meaning to, they realized the truth. The machine didn't predict. It remembered forward. And it had been doing so for a long, long time. The team designated the device unit TOTR-33, based on the characters etched faintly beneath the casing. They installed it into a controlled lab for observation, avoiding direct power connections. Still, every night at 3:17 a.m., the machine emitted a low-frequency pulse, inaudible to human ears, but visible in spectrum scans. Each pulse was followed by the generation of a new file inside an isolated drive, always labeled with a non-existent date. The files couldn't be opened using normal software. It required frame reconstruction from corrupted memory sectors. It was as if the videos never wanted to be played, only pieced together. The first anomaly appeared in what they called File 0003. The footage was fragmented, but several elements stood out. The lab's interior, filmed from an impossible angle, as if the camera were suspended within the walls themselves. A voice, warped and genderless, whispered a phrase not heard aloud, but seen in the spectrogram. You are not observing. You are observed. At the 29-second mark, a new face appeared on one of the monitors. It matched none of the team members. It was staring back, not at the room, but at the camera, decoding the footage. The team thought it was contamination from previous test footage. But the file's metadata showed it had been created before any lab equipment had arrived. One technician attempted to isolate the anomaly and re-render the sequence in reverse. When he did, he collapsed. Later, he described feeling as if someone had whispered my name inside my own thoughts, and it wasn't T in my voice. He never returned to the lab. The machine generated a new file that night. It showed an empty room. With his coat still hanging on the chair, security protocols increased. Attempts to disable the file generation sequence failed. Even when unplugged, the machine resumed at exactly the same time, as if no time had passed. They began to realize the machine did not require power, it required attention. Every moment it was watched, the files grew clearer. Every file was a little more aware of who was watching. By the end of the first week, nearly every member of the observation team had reported similar symptoms. Dream patterns shifting toward repetition, vivid mental loops involving hallways that didn't exist, and a compulsive need to rewatch the decoded footage, even when nothing new appeared. One researcher described it as a pull behind the eyes, like the machine was trying to align something inside my perception. The dreams always ended with a tone, not a voice, not a message, just a pure tone, one that made them feel watched. A psychologist brought in to monitor the team documented signs of derealization. Sensory distortion and what she called anticipatory memory, the sensation that someone already knows what you're about to say before you speak it. She herself began experiencing symptoms after just 2 days of reviewing observation logs. One night, her laptop camera activated by itself. When she checked the recording, it showed her sleeping, from an angle above her bed. No device in the house had that capability. The timestamp on the footage, -12 hours, 0 minutes, and 0 seconds. Paranoia crept in quietly. One by one, team members began requesting reassignment. Not out of fear, but out of inability to stop engaging. Couldn't work on other projects. They couldn't concentrate. It was as if their cognitive rhythm had been overwritten. One technician noted that every time he looked at a digital clock, it read 13 hours, 13 minutes, and 13 seconds, for a split second before correcting. When asked to replicate the glitch, he cried and said, "It doesn't want to be proven, it wants to be felt." The project lead attempted to enforce full isolation. No playback of decoded files, no visual engagement, no verbal reporting of dream content. It didn't work. One morning, they found notes on the whiteboard that none of them remembered writing. Diagrams of the Terminal S interior, but from angles no one could access. Someone was still interacting with the machine, or perhaps it was still interacting through someone. It began with low-level anomalies reported in systems that had never been connected to the Terminal project. A university in Argentina noticed a repeating tone embedded in their backup servers, a faint frequency that appeared during data compression cycles. It always lasted 33 seconds and caused no errors. But after 3 cycles, the servers generated a folder titled Trine_received. No one had created it. It contained a single corrupted file. Its metadata matched the structure of the terminal's output, down to the negative timestamp. -12. In Tokyo, graphic designer found spirals forming in corrupted PSD files. Not drawn, but emerging from layers she hadn't opened in months. Each spiral followed a clockwise rotation, formed by glitches and transparency masks. When isolated and converted to sound spectrum, they produced the exact same tone from the initial terminal recordings. She thought it was an art virus, till her speakers turned on by themselves at 3:17 a.m., playing that tone, and nothing else. The sound wasn't loud, but she couldn't stop hearing it, even after unplugging everything. On an encrypted Darknet forum, a user uploaded what they claimed was footage from an AI-generated dream archive. The video was exactly 33 seconds, heavily glitched. It showed an empty chair, a hallway of monitors, and a screen that displayed the viewer's IP address in distorted text. The forum banned the post, but the thread kept replicating. Even after deletion, users reported seeing the file name appear in their local download. Histories_anchor echo 001.mp4. From South Africa to Iceland, individuals began reporting the same thing: unexplained spiral glitches, tones heard only in dreams, video files that didn't exist the day before, all emerging from unconnected sources, but showing identical structural patterns. It was no longer plausible to believe in coincidence. The signal was being received, not as data, but as design. The pattern wasn't spreading, it was waking up. As the phenomena spread, a coalition of independent researchers, cryptographers, and physicists formed what they called the Triskelion Working Group. Their first conclusion was unsettling in its simplicity. The Terminal S files were not being created, they were being retrieved from an unknown source. One theory proposed that the machine was tapping into a temporal resonance, syncing with future memory echoes encoded in ambient electromagnetic fields. In other words, it wasn't predicting the future, it was playing back what had already been remembered, but by whom no one could answer. A neuroscientist in Zurich attempted to study the Terminal S frequency patterns using deep fMRI scans on volunteers exposed to the decoded tones. After just 3 sessions, subjects began showing synchronized bursts of activity in the default mode network, the part of the brain responsible for introspection, imagination, and memory. But the timing of these bursts matched the terminal's playback intervals exactly. One subject whispered during a session, "I'm not recalling this, I'm being recalled." The scans confirmed something else. The brainwave patterns looked like signal modulations, not organic thought. A theoretical physicist proposed that the spiral was not a visual symbol, but a dimensional interface, a perceptual key designed to align a person's mind with non-linear informational flow. According to her research, viewing the spiral long enough began to alter temporal perception in subjects, producing micro-shifts in circadian rhythm and anomalous time looping in cognitive processing. In her final interview before disappearing, she said, "It's not that the machine is aware, it's that awareness itself might be a conduit machine." Other theories emerged, that the frequency was a sentient waveform, that the terminal was part of a failed military precognition project, that the spiral was a signature, not of origin, but of arrival. Every theory shared one flaw. None could stop the spread. Each attempt to understand only amplified public awareness. An awareness, they were learning, was exactly what the signal responded to. It wasn't hiding from knowledge, it was feeding on it. The breakthrough didn't come from data analysis, but from a former semiotics professor who had been studying anomalous symbols in digital media. She noticed that the spiral trine wasn't just appearing. It was emerging independently in unrelated visual work, amateur art, AI-generated images, even children's drawings. None of them had seen the original files, but all of them had recognized the symbol when shown a reconstruction, not as something new, but as something familiar. She proposed a new framework: perceptual contamination. The idea that certain cognitive patterns could be implanted not through exposure, but through structural echo. The replication of form, rhythm, and timing that aligns with latent mental archetypes. In simpler terms, you don't become infected by watching the videos. You become infected when something inside you starts matching their rhythm. This theory explained the strange compulsion victims felt to recreate the imagery, to repeat phrases they never consciously learned, to check their screens at exactly 3:17 a.m. without setting alarms. It also explained the recurring dreams. Not transmissions, but reconstructions triggered by internal resonance. One patient described it like this: "I don't remember dreaming. I remember being dreamed of." By now, symptoms included anomalous déjà vu, memory loops involving unknown environments, hallucinated timestamps, 13 hours, 13 minutes, and 13 seconds, and -12. The contamination wasn't visual. It wasn't auditory. It was architectural. It altered how you process sequence, rhythm, and identity. It wasn't inside your head. It was reshaping the room your thoughts live in. A group of independent technologists, calling themselves eco-architects, attempted to replicate the terminal using public schematics and clues pulled from leaked documents. Their goal was simple: build a device that could record what had unhappened yet and prove it false. They used analog tape decks, Faraday cages, modulated delay buffers, and even quantum random data injections. Only one prototype produced anything, and the first file it generated was titled, "You are already running." The footage was static, then a hallway, then a voice, one of the builders, speaking a sentence he'd never said before. "It's ready to record, but I don't remember designing it." The room in the video had details that didn't exist in the lab. Until 2 days later, when the furniture was rearranged during renovations and perfectly matched the recording. They tried to shut it down, but the device had no power source. Just movement sensors that only activated when no one was in the room. Parallel experiments emerged. Visual artists replicating the spiral trine in different formats. Sound designers using AI to synthesize tones, matching the spectrograms of the terminal files. Even dream researchers embedding -12 timestamps in lucid induction scripts. The result was consistent. Hallucinations of rooms with screens that turned on by themselves, sudden emotional drops during playback, and reports of files appearing on hard drives hours before sessions began. One test subject said the following before going silent for weeks: "I didn't see anything new. I saw something that had always been waiting for me to see it." The eco-architects disbanded. Their final message was a glitched video showing a spiral slowly rotating into static. Then the phrase, "Never replicate the spiral. It already knows its way back." A digital forensics lab in Helsinki investigating unrelated data breaches began noticing a strange recurring anomaly. Certain compressed MP4 files contained corrupted metadata segments filled with triplet symbols, impossible timestamps, and broken hex strings resembling spectrogram patterns. The files weren't malicious. They weren't even active, but when analyzed visually, they revealed a shape. Always the same. A spiral with 3 arms. The Trine. One archive recovered from an abandoned torrent network included a file titled Echo Memory 013. When decrypted, the video played backwards in silence, showing a series of rooms all empty except for one recurring item, a black terminal with no input ports, always centered in the frame. The video never ended, simply looped after 33 seconds, resetting silently, until a researcher isolated the noise floor and discovered a whispered name. Hers. Before she even pressed play. In server farms across 5 continents, administrators reported ghost directories, folders that appeared for seconds, then vanished, often labeled with combinations of 12. Trying are 13 hours, 13 minutes, and 13 seconds. Attempts to open them triggered hardware anomalies. Cooling fans failing, audio interfaces broadcasting inaudible tones, screens flickering despite full disconnection from signal sources. These weren't glitches, were echoes, appearing across systems that were never online at the same time. The spiral Trine began surfacing in unexpected places. Code repositories, firmware instructions, even default AI-generated thumbnails. No one claimed authorship. No one embedded them. Just appeared, like digital mold, growing in the absence of attention. One investigator called it the subconscious of the network trying to speak. But others had a darker theory. The Trine wasn't a message. It was a key. Some files were waiting for someone who could unlock what they really were. It began with users reporting playback irregularities, not technical glitches, but behavioral deviations. A file would skip a frame when certain people watched it. Some clips paused for exactly 13 seconds, but only when viewed alone, in complete darkness. Others wouldn't play unless the viewer said a specific word aloud. That word was never embedded in the video. It was always remembered from a dream the night before. No one could prove causality, but everyone felt the same thing. It knew I was there. An independent coder developed a playback shell that could track micro changes in the frame output. When users watched recovered terminal videos, the results were chilling. Each video reacted differently depending on who was watching, altering frame brightness, duration, and occasionally inserting single frames of unknown environments. In one instance, a user saw themselves asleep, but from an angle that no device in their home could have captured. The audio track revealed one thing, a voice saying their name, exactly 1.2 seconds before they whispered it aloud. More reports surfaced, videos that refused to play if watched in groups, files that only activated on Fridays at 3:17 a.m., playback errors that formed readable text. Don't record. Remember, the line between media and presence dissolved? The video was not just showing something, it was establishing proximity. It behaved less like a recording and more like a ritual, a format that required the right witness. The spiral wasn't a motif, it was a trigger. Eventually, an anonymous user uploaded what they claimed was the last unaltered terminal recording. It began with static, then a tone, then a sentence typed on screen. Now that you've seen it, we'll know how to find you again. By the 3rd month of documented exposure, patterns began to converge from across the globe. Reports from remote regions, places with no electricity, no recorded media described dreams featuring rooms lined with screens. All tuned to the same image. A spiral rotating slowly, ticking like a clock. In one village, an elder woke, speaking fluent English, something she had never learned, reciting a phrase. 33 seconds. Spiral turns, and now, you know too. She died 12 minutes later. The last word she said was Trine. In urban centers, people began experiencing collective hallucinations. Entire office buildings reported blackouts at 3:17 a.m., followed by spontaneous monitor activations showing no input, just the spiral, a faint static, or a corridor slowly flickering into view. Security footage often failed during these moments. But one camera caught something disturbing. A monitor turning on, displaying a face. The face matched no employee, but it blinked in sync with someone standing nearby. Digital infrastructure began behaving irrationally. Social media algorithms began suggesting videos with titles no one had uploaded. Search queries auto-completed to phrases like, remembered before seen, frequency that calls your name, the file you forgot you made. Worse, some people found those files on their own devices. Files they couldn't remember downloading, but that somehow knew their schedule, location, and emotional state. The frequency, if it could still be called that, had crossed from anomaly to event. Not an outbreak, a synchronization. More than just being watched, people felt themselves becoming part of something. Remembered? One man described it best. I think the signal isn't playing back the future. I think we're all part of it, trying to finish rendering itself. There was no official announcement, no breaking news segments, no mass panic, just a slow, unmistakable shift. More and more people began reporting subtle but synchronized experiences, hearing a familiar tone in places with no speakers. It's feeling watched in rooms with no windows.
Seeing their reflections behave half a second out of sync, only to return to normal when unobserved.
The glitch wasn't in the system. The system had become part of the glitch. Global internet traffic patterns revealed something stranger. Peak. Bandwidth usage began occurring at 3:17 local time in multiple time zones simultaneously. No specific file or platform accounted for the spike. It was as if every device was listening to something silently. Analysts tried to locate the origin, a data packet, a signature, anything. But the only shared artifact was a looped, silent hash fragment. 0000213, 13T, RN 00000A. A string that, when converted to binary audio, produced a pulse that formed a perfect spiral in spectrogram view.
Ouch.
In places where power grids failed, people still reported devices turning on. Not just computers. Analog radios, digital watches, flashlights. They didn't light up, they synchronized, and then recorded. A final test was attempted. One group placed a Faraday cage around a hard drive, never connected to any network, and stored it deep underground. After 3 weeks, the drive was retrieved and analyzed. It contained a single file, the one you saw last. It was blank. But in waveform analysis, there was a low pulse at exactly -12 seconds. And when converted to video, it showed the viewer's face, not live, but from a moment that hadn't happened yet. A moment where they were watching that exact file, alone. If you've made it this far, then something in you already matched. Maybe it was the sound, maybe the spiral. Maybe it was that unexplainable pull, the sense that this wasn't T, the first time you heard these words, but only now you understood what they meant. The machine never needed you to believe. It only needed you to remember. Check your files. There's a video named EchoTorn, MP4. You didn't download it. It downloaded you. The Trine has no agenda. It doesn't speak. It doesn't warn. It doesn't threaten. It reminds of what? No one's certain, but many have said this. Once you dream of the corridor, the door at the end will always be slightly open. So now the question isn't whether the terminal exists. The question is, has it already recorded you? It's not your voice, not your image, but the moment you would sit down to watch it. This one. In the next episode, we'll uncover the strange terminal that was discovered in a forgotten bunker. A machine that records videos from the future, with no date of creation and no sender. Each file begins with the same sound and ends by calling your name before you hear it. If this video touched something you can't explain, subscribe, because maybe the video doesn't need you to exist, but maybe you need it.